Hello, all. Welcome to Joffrey the Giant. I'm Joffrey Swait, and today I am going to be reacting to an article that came out in The Guardian about theonomists, about theocrats, about the rise of an ultra-conservative church in Idaho. Now, before I get into this story, I'm just going to put out there that I am a member of the church the article is about. And given our current cultural climate, I now expect everyone who dislikes the church, who read that article and said, about time someone wrote this, that you're going to check out now. You're going to leave. And then everyone who agrees with me is going to stay. And that's the state of rhetoric and debate in our culture today. So I guess so long, everybody. If you decide to stick around, then I welcome your comments. Before we actually get started, just a reminder to click like, to subscribe, to share this video. It helps the channel. At this point of my YouTube career, I'm basically just doing kind of whatever strikes my fancy at any given time. Now, the article from The Guardian is called "Make It a Christian Town." That's a quote, right? Make it a Christian town. The ultra-conservative church on the rise in Idaho. And it's by one Jason Wilson. Okay. So here's the story. And I want to talk a little bit about people's background before we get into the story itself. Okay. The reason I'm doing that is there's no such thing as objectivity, right? None of us can be completely objective about something. Now, there is truth. God himself can be objective, but we are incapable of objectivity. So we strive toward truth. But I think there's also just a case to be made, for particularly in the public circle. Hey, let's have newspapers and TV channels that are partisan. The more, the merrier. And then let us sift through all of that ourselves. The myth of neutrality from the old line established media hopefully is dead by now, and only baby boomers dig on it. Now, that being said, The Guardian definitely is a leftist publication. When I clicked on this link for the first time, I was faced with this big pop-up cover ad to donate money to fight climate change, right? And The Guardian, of course, has a reputation I'm sure you're familiar with. And the article is by one Jason Wilson. Okay, now, Jason Wilson is... It's a terrible of me to think that this is sufficient, but Jason Wilson is a Portlander. So after reading the article, I went and checked out his Twitter feed. Now, I do want to say about this story that it actually tends toward journalism. Okay. There was a story that came out in Vice just a little while ago that was absolutely just unethical in its treatment of the material, and particularly in its sourcing. This article, which apparently is the first of a few that he has queued up, is not that. It actually feels like reporting. Now, I'm going to go into this article and just point out some of the slants, some of the labeling that primes the reader to move in a certain direction. But I do have to say, this reads like a real article. Okay, there were only a couple of people who preferred to remain anonymous. Okay, so just so you get an idea of who Jason Wilson is, boom, there's his Twitter. They lie to everyone. They lie to the fish. Hey, I dig on your skepticism, Jason. I'm with you. They do lie to everyone. Okay, now, as you go through his Twitter, you sort of see that he writes for, say, the Southern Poverty Law Center. He retweets Antifa folks. Okay, now, let's see. Yeah, the feed is updated. So there we go. Right. So he retweets Antifa people, and he's definitely got a hobby horse. And I don't mean to be demeaning with that. His passion is fighting right wing hate. Right. So that's his shtick. And he has decided that we fit neatly into his shtick. Okay. Now, this is not, absolutely not, to dismiss the story or him. This is for us to understand where he's coming from. Because, as I said, everyone has a perspective. No one writes with objectivity. He has an agenda, as he ought to. His agenda is wrong and wicked, which that ought not to be. But I'm not showing you that, or saying, hey, okay, he's in Portland, Great Pacific Northwest, seems like a typical Portland reporter. That's not to dismiss him. That's for you to understand where this guy is coming from when he writes this. Okay, so now let's look at the article. So, make it a Christian town, the ultra-conservative church on the rise in Idaho. Just with the headline, we're already seeing that the obsession is with, let me cover that up. Oops. The obsession here is with right-wing and left-wing secular politics, right? So, a child of the French Revolution. So this church, my church, Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho, is being labeled as ultra-conservative. Now, what is conservative? My wife and I are not registered with any party. And I know a lot of people in my church are not. There's enormous disenchantment with the Republican Party and with conservatism. I refuse to say conservatism as a movement. Now, what someone like Jason Wilson would take that as is that we are beyond what is conservative. We're more conservative than the conservatives. Okay? So that makes us ultra conservative. As far as I'm concerned, we're not even on that spectrum. I mean, we have Chestertonian distributivists in our church. Okay? So there's that left versus right thing in which the religious life of people and the religious life of a community is subsumed to life within the state. That's what really matters. That's what really makes us human for people like Wilson. Okay. I love that his name is Wilson too. My pastor's name is Wilson. All right. And then we have this famous picture. Lots of people I know in here. I say famous, right? Like it's circulated in my circles. And this was from a psalm sing that was a protest of the mask mandates. And some of the events around these psalm sings were even retweeted by President Trump and made national news. So perhaps not famous, but recognizable in certain circles. And a bunch of people from my church here. This was not exclusively a Christ Church event, but I see my music minister and a bunch of other people I know. I don't think this cross was brought by a Christ Kirker, but I am glad that the cross was brought regardless. Okay. And this is going to be what the video is, y'all. I'm going to read through this thing and react. So, buckle up or take off, and I'll see you in the next video. Increased influence of Christ Church, whose leaders want to create U.S. theocracy, come as social conservatives aim to gain traction. A Guardian investigation has revealed that a controversial church whose leader has openly expressed the ambition to create a theocracy in America has accumulated significant influence in the city of Moscow, Idaho. Okay, why these scare quotes are around theocracy, I am not sure. I don't know who he's supposed to be quoting, or if this is really just bad editing. But we'll just keep rolling. Christ Church has a stated goal to make Moscow a Christian town, and public records, interviews, and open source materials online show how its leadership has extended its power and activities in the town. Woo. Okay. Now, without quibbling over whether I want a theocracy or the leaders of this church want a theocracy, and I'm not a leader of the church, by the way, I'm some schmuck. There is a difference between claiming that someone wants to create a theocracy and saying that someone says they want to make a certain town a Christian town. Okay. And just a basic familiarity with Christian theology would prepare you for that. In particular, a familiarity with evangelical theology. So if some random evangelical in Tennessee or New York State said, I want my town to be a Christian town, no one would care because he would be talking about converting everyone and bringing everyone into church and let's all let Jesus into our hearts, and the town wouldn't change. The real problem is that the town is changing. So many passionate Christians are moving here. The passionate Christians who are already here have put in institutions, some of which the writer gets into. I'm going to start calling him the writer because saying Wilson will be confusing. All right. So church figures have browbeaten elected officials over COVID restrictions, built powerful institutions in parallel to secular government, harassed perceived opponents, and accumulated land and businesses in pursuit of a long-term goal of transforming America into a nation ruled according to its own ultra-conservative moral precepts. Okay, this paragraph is purely from his perspective and lacks even an attempt at objectivity. Starting with browbeaten, right? So that assumes I, the writer, and you, the reader, we're looking at this and we understand that the elected officials are the good guys. And the people who resisted their mask mandates browbeat them, harangued them, bullied them. So there's this already the assumption. Okay, these are the bad guys. They browbeat the good guys. They built powerful institutions, etc. They have long-term goals. They're accumulating land. And first of all, this is just what people do. People start businesses. People buy land. People want to have success in their endeavors. These Christian people want to have success in their endeavors. Now, is there a long-term goal of transforming America into a nation ruled according to its own ultra-conservative moral precepts? No. Okay, now, the writer and others will disagree with this and say that I'm redefining things, but I get to do that because he's just tossing out his own terms as well. What there is a long-term goal of transforming America into a nation ruled by Jesus Christ, into a nation in which people live in the light of the gospel. You will say that these are ultra-conservative moral precepts, and I will say how sad that you view morality through a political lens. The rise of Christchurch. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Whee! All right, so the rise of Christchurch may be playing out in a small Idaho city, but it comes at a time when the U.S. is roiled by the far right, including Christian nationalism, and when social conservatives are seeking to roll back basic tenets of U.S. life, such as legal abortion, as well as dominating powerful national institutions, such as the Supreme Court. Okay. This, as I said, is his hobby horse. This is the thing he's passionate about. This is the reason this writer has come to Moscow. Okay. His crusade is against the far political right of the United States and against Christian nationalism. All right. But then he says there are certain basic tenets of U.S. life. A basic tenet of U.S. life is something that was legalized in 1973 that has been fought against by some since it was instituted. Legalized abortion. Basic tenets of U.S. life are supposed to be things like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, right? So am I un-American for being against legal abortion? Apparently so. And I love that this writer is is talking about Christian nationalism and the far right, and he is putting out an exclusive definition of what being American is. Now, I wasn't born in the United States. I'm an American. This guy also is an American, alas. And he can look at me and say, alas, that you are an American. Let's fight. That's fine. But it's not un American to have this fight or to go up against legal abortion. As for the Supreme Court, well, how about some political discourse? How about a political life? How about my right to have a political opinion? My political opinion is that the Supreme Court is legislating instead of judging. I don't want to destroy the idea of a Supreme Court. While the church's previous controversies have centered on its founder and pastor, Douglas Wilson, a new generation of male church leaders, just on the side, just tossed in the word male, that was good, including Wilson's son, have found ways to expand the church's reach in Moscow and beyond, even gaining footholds in mainstream popular culture in the broader U.S. Now, Douglas Wilson's son, Nate Wilson, is a best-selling children's author, and he has a bunch of other media projects that he does. And of course, there's Canon Press, which will be brought up later. That being said, I never get a vibe from Nate Wilson that he wants to be more than an author and a producer of good things. His father is still the big name, the controversial name. Nate Wilson is not queued up to be pastor of any church. And it seems a little odd that they would, he would focus on Wilson's son. All right. Even gaining footholds in mainstream popular culture in the broader U.S., that is a reference to Nate Wilson's novels and to Ninja. Hey Ninja. Nope. Oh Boy Ninja. Anyway, there's a series on Netflix about ninjas, cartoons. All right. How am I not remembering? They're really good. Anyway, it's not Oh Boy Ninja, but that one. In recent months, Christ Church has advocated for resistance to COVID mandates in Moscow, and Wilson has attempted to give theological ballast to opposition to restrictions and vaccination programs, as well as warning of political violence. Okay. Last month, a video version of a post by Wilson at his well-read blog was removed from YouTube. The blog post, entitled A Biblical Defense of Fake Vaccine IDs, was based on a conspiracy theory asserting that the vaccine response was a power play on the part of the Biden administration, which intended to leave the restrictions in place permanently. That's a slight misrepresentation, but okay, fine, generally. I mean, just first of all, calling it a conspiracy theory. This basically becomes an opinion piece at that point. Now, Wilson's assertion was not that this was necessarily a long-term plan for Biden and his cabal to control everybody. His big point was, this is what wicked governors do. This is the direction of the state unless the church fights for its rights, unless Christians fight for their rights. And he would not be alone in that. You could pick up French philosophers to read about the inexorable advance of the state. Nothing particularly unique here. Wilson further claimed that we are not yet in a hot civil war with shooting and all, but we are in a Cold War civil war, and urged readers to resist openly in concert with any others in your same position, claiming that this would not be rebellion against lawful authority, but an example of a free people refusing to go along with their own enslavement. Okay. Now he's going to try to make the point that just talking about these things is threatening these things. So Douglas Wilson is threatening violence because he's talking about the prospect of violence, when in fact what's happening is cultural Woo! God bless me. Cultural observation. O tempora, o mores. He's just examining the times. The writer himself is obsessed with the internal conflict in the United States, and he talks about these prospects. All right. The post about fake IDs, fake vaccine IDs, was met with outrage, including from other prominent evangelicals. Very true. I was in Brazil when that video came out, and it had reverberations down there. That was not the only time that Wilson's activities and positions have led to criticism from other evangelicals, and associations with Wilson have led to crises in other churches. In recent months, member and clergy resigned from Minneapolis's Bethlehem Baptist Church, and staff resigned from its associated seminary, in part over the appearance of newly appointed BCS President Joe Rigney on Man Rampant, a video series hosted by Wilson and streamed on platforms including Amazon Prime. The show promotes Wilson's long-held position that men need to assert themselves in society. Christ Church was founded in Moscow in the 1990s, and experts who have studied the church estimate the size of the congregation and its offshoot churches at about 2,000, or 10% of the city's total population. Experts, see, the presence of experts elevates this, the DEFCON level of this thing. There are a couple of churches in town from the denomination, and they have about 2,000 members. I know that. I'm not an expert. And I can see the sign outside of town saying population 25,000. I've said this very thing myself, to say that the church ought to have more influence in the area. Yeah, experts. It takes experts to say this. That is disingenuous. But these experts, also say that the church is increasingly drawing people to the area who are attracted to the idea of Northern Idaho as a conservative redoubt against American modernity, and by the church's Reconstructionist position, which holds that the world will need to be governed according to their interpretation of biblical morality before Christ returns to earth. Okay, so this is also something that is true, something that is observable, and it's bumpy for more than one reason, not just because of the conflict between left and right in this town, but because there are outsiders moving here, and there are a lot of locals. The same thing happens all over the country. New Mexicans gripe about Californians. Well, Idahoans gripe about Californians too, and I have a bunch of Californian friends here now. Of course, the difference with these Californians moving here is that they often are indeed Reconstructionists. They're definitely Christians. Now, Reconstructionism doesn't hold that the world will need to be governed according to our interpretation of biblical morality. It's fair for you to say that, but it could be said with, again, more objective language. You could say that we believe that the world will be governed according to biblical morality, or will need to be governed according to biblical morality. That's it. We don't actually say it should be our interpretation. Everyone has their own thoughts and their own opinions, right? You read certain documents, you interpret them a certain way. Obviously, is the interpretation, right? We're human beings. So the fact that that's put in there is yet another example of disingenuity, right? He wants to make sure that the reader takes his side. So it's according to our interpretation. Again, we don't say that it's our interpretation. We interpret. Christchurch's previous controversies have garnered national attention. Recent reporting focused attention once more on the church's and Wilson's handling of a series of sexual abuse cases and the theological subordination of women. That's the Vice article I mentioned. Now, on his Twitter feed, James Wilson does say that he has several stories queued up, so I'm sure he'll hit this harder later. Okay, so in 2005, Wilson asked the judge for leniency with a particular case. Again, I'm leaving it up there so you guys can read along. And then that man eventually later was married. Okay. All right. Wilson has faced scrutiny over other positions. So I actually admire his restraint here, but I'm cynical. I believe that that he has other stories coming out about this, the sexual abuse scandals stuff. Now, I'm not going to get into the content of all that stuff. Hey, maybe we can do it later when he puts more stories out. I just hope that his stories are written to a higher standard than the unethical stories that came out on Vice. If you go visit this story, you can find the link or you can just Google it. All right. Mentioning the other very known controversy in our circles about the book he wrote on Southern Slavery as It Was with Steve Wilson. There's lots of resources online of Steve Wilkins, rather, of Douglas Wilson talking about this. So I'll just look at this paragraph here. The book depicted slavery in the antebellum Southern United States as a relationship based upon mutual affection and confidence, a misrepresentation of the quote there, and argued that the enslaved enjoyed a life of plenty, of simple pleasures, of food, clothes, and good medical care. Okay, so quotes completely misrepresenting, but there it is. That's what he's saying. And I think a lot of this is an inability. I hope this is what it is. I hope it's not lack of research. Just an inability to see things outside of his lens, right? From his interpretation. I just love that he's threw in that interpretation word in there. All right. Wilson has repeatedly disavowed any interest in national electoral politics, but Christchurch's eventual aim, where am I? The eventual aim is what Wilson explicitly describes in a 2016 book as theocracy, or a network of nations bound together by a formal acknowledgement of the lordship of Jesus Christ. I don't know, but I believe that he was talking about Christendom then, not theocracy. I could be wrong. As opposed to secular society ruled by civil governments, which are in necessary degrees satanic, demonic, and influenced by the god of this world, who is the devil. I mean, that sounds like Jacques Ellul. That sounds like René Girard. So, whatever. Like, you know, there are leftist French theologians who would also say this. This is just philosophy. This is just political philosophy through a Christian lens. Nothing unique here. I mean, many are the writers who have written about the dark satanic mills who are not even Christians. These beliefs have led Christchurch into conflicts with local government. Very, very true. But additionally, Wilson and other Christchurch members have founded a range of local and national institutions which are affiliated with or sponsored by the church. Logos School, Canon Press. Okay, so many entities associated with the church. I don't know what associated with the church means. I can think of another Christian school here in town. You know, it has no formal connection to the church, but there are a bunch of people from the CREC churches in that Christian school. Would he say that that's what's associated with? Insiders who spoke on condition of anonymity. There it is. We have experts and we have insiders. Said that all members tithe 10% of their household income, and wealthier members are expected to make an even larger contribution. Okay, calumny and lies. Or just profound ignorance. Yeah, so first of all, it's not true. But there's also a basic lack of awareness of Christian theology and American Christian culture and how it works. Okay. It's generally accepted in Protestant and evangelical circles that one ought to tithe 10%. C.S. Lewis famously wrote that Christians of a certain social level with certain type of job should always live less well than his non-Christian peers because of how much he's giving, right? The word tithe itself comes from tenth. And it works that way in other languages too, because of the Old Testament. Now, very few churches actually teach that it should be 10%. I remember in Florida, there was a church, a very controversial church, but I think for good reason, because they actually did teach. They taught prosperity gospel stuff. You give, and God will bless you. And they did not only teach 10%, but kind of like they went after it. And their staff had that 10% automatically just taken out. And most Christians I knew who knew that were absolutely outraged by that. Our church doesn't have any of that. I go to this church. Now, and I have been on staff at churches and I have seen church budgets. People don't give 10%. Many do. My father always did. I do. And so here you have a concentration of very purposeful, faithful Christians. It is very likely that a high percentage of us tithe 10%. But there's no expectation of anything. That's a straight up calumny. Within a network of educational institutions, publishing houses, churches, and national associations that Wilson has founded or led, a small number of men from a small number of families have come to exert significant power within the organization and Moscow. Okay. I'm actually running out of time. But there's a little kernel in here that kind of maybe touches a bit of a sore spot. But basically, like I work for a company started by a guy who went to school here in town. It's an educational institution. So, I mean, are we going to claim that Wilson was involved in that because he started the institution that this guy went to and studied at and inspired him to start an educational institution of his own? Now, here he specifically talks about these things that Wilson has founded or led. Okay. I'm not sure what is meant by a network, though. All right. There's no formal network. There's just a bunch of people doing a bunch of stuff, and he got a bunch of stuff done in the 90s, in the aughts. He continues to get stuff done, but what should be scaring you is that there's a whole lot of other stuff happening that has nothing to do with Wilson. Now, it does so happen that there is a group of movers and shakers in this town who get a whole lot done. Okay. And they are significant. Now, exert significant power within the organization. There is no organization. What's the organization? Are you talking about the network? Like, what are you talking about? I hope that more and more Christians in this area and from Christchurch do more and more butt-kicking stuff. And I think that there is sometimes a bit of a, well, we've been doing all this butt-kicking stuff, let's hold on to it, and then other people coming up and wanting to butt kick, but that's just natural. Anyway, I'm throwing you a bone here. Not least among these is Wilson's own family, with him as its head. Okay. Doug Wilson is not Nate Wilson's head. Oh, goodness gracious. At an SAC, New St. Andrews College, for example, the college president, Wilson's son-in-law, Ben Merkel, another son-in-law, Luke Yankovich, sits on the board of trustees, as does Wilson himself, and Christchurch's associate pastor, Toby Sumter. Why Sumter was thrown in there, I'm not sure. I guess being associate pastor is like being a son. Douglas Wilson is also on faculty and listed as a senior fellow. Also on faculty are his son and his brother. I actually do think that this is something that our august pastor and our those who are leaders among us should work to dissolve a little bit, because of this type of thing. But mostly it's a big whatever. Okay. So basically, what you had here, what this is a sign of, is how few people there were in the 90s to start kicking butt. This is the result of that. And gird your loins for battle, because we've been coming in, we've been filling out the spots. You don't even know how many of these sinister institutions people have gone out and started on their own that are just doing their thing and changing the world for Jesus Christ. Sneak it up on you. Okay. They draw salaries from the college. Ooh, how sinister. They're on staff and they draw salaries. Okay. Merkel Yankovic and all three Wilson men are also elders at Christ Church, along with the founding director and former trustee at NSAC, Moscow resident Andrew Krapuschetz. I don't know how many elders Christ Church has, but it is an enormous number because it's a big church, and they are very careful to make sure that they have enough elders to do their jobs, to help look after the people. And if you are in the writer's vein of thought, perhaps you are insulted that an elder from a church would care about my life. But I like them to care about my life. That's part of Christian community and Christian love. So to say that these these 6 men are elders is almost irrelevant. Pretty much any man of wisdom, love, and weight is an elder at our church. So what? When I moved to town, one of the first things I did was call my elder. He was none of these men. And now I'm at a parish group. The elder there is none of these men. All right. Until June 2021, when the company was acquired by a competitor, and Andrew Krapuschetz's company. Krapuschetz had been the chief executive of Moscow's largest private employer, MZ, for more than 19 years. And then he goes on to talk about how much they hired New St. Andrews people. Okay. Ooh, sinister. And people at Christchurch have held senior positions at MZ. I hope he writes another story about MZ. So MZ was recently sold, and so it's going to stop having this sort of effect. But he goes into all of this. Since his departure from MZ, Andrew Krapuschetz has started a new venture, a jobs website called Red Balloon, which advertises itself as connecting employers who value freedom with employees who value it too, in a world beyond cancel culture, where employees are free to work without fear that they will find themselves on the wrong side of their employer's politics. Okay, and then he says many of the website's initial clients appear to be either church-run or founded organizations or companies belonging to other church members. That may have been true when he wrote this, if this is his first story. It's a startup. It just started. He told his friends. What a conspiracy. He told his friends. And all his friends were like, yeah, that's a sweet idea. It's a lot bigger than that now, and it's going to continue to grow. I mean, Krapuschetz was on a national news network, Fox News or something, I don't know, to talk about Red Balloon. It's growing. But the first thing you do when you start a business is tell your friends. Now Krapuschetz has branched out into property development. You're telling me that a rich businessman is investing in real estate? How sinister. They are trying to attract more people here. They are attracting more people here. Get scared. So this local businessman who spoke on condition of anonymity, as always, said the church had already had a disproportionate presence in the downtown areas, trying to take over local institutions like a food co-op. Okay. Oh, man. Okay. That didn't happen, but whatever. What happens is that the leftists and hippies feel threatened when people care about what goes on in their town. All right. He also referred to an ad for New St. Andrews College that had been seen as transphobic by many in Moscow. That was that video where the boy walked into the boys' bathroom and the girl walked into the girls' bathroom. And New St. Andrews is recruiting based on that, right? To throw red meat and recruit on the basis of hate, right? Obviously, that's how you see it. We've established the polarization, the antithesis. Okay. As far as we're concerned, we've got the science with us. We're throwing red meat to people who want to love. They want to love men by teaching them that they're men. And we want to love women by teaching them that they're women. We don't want everyone to be the same. We're on the side of diversity. Yay. In response to detailed emailed questions about various aspects of Christchurch's operation, Doug Wilson did not offer a specific response, but wrote that the Guardian's approach illustrates an absurd fixation and anti-church bigotry that we have come to expect from certain elements of the leftist media. I do wonder about, so, Wilson seems to have, Douglas Wilson has this policy of not entertaining leftist public, just companies, publications, media. That's the word I wanted. And I get why. People lie about him all the time. But yeah, I don't know. I wonder about the wisdom of that. I get it. I don't know what I would do in his position. It's complicated. Without a doubt, though, he's right. That is what the Guardian is, right? You log into the Guardian and immediately there's the climate change stuff for you to give money to, right? They take a propagandist angle. And the last paragraph, weirdly, is about MZ. And Crapuchet said, under my watch, MZ grew into a global company with offices on 2 continents, and in an ever-tightening labor market, we hired talent wherever we could find it, including from the 3 local colleges, Washington State, U of I, and New St. Andrews. And that's true. Basically, nothing we do can be right in these folks' eyes. What we need to do is shut up and sit down. If we start businesses and run them the way we want to, we're wrong. If we start schools and run them the way we want our kids to have an education, we're wrong. Basically, if we don't participate in the state and we don't participate in leftist life, we're wrong. We need to shut up and sit down. In a nutshell, thou hast it. Okay. So I am pumped about more of these stories coming out. I absolutely can't wait to dive into them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Obviously, a much longer video, and I hope the quality is good. Recording on my computer has turned out to be a pain in the butt, so I've actually streamed to record this. As I said, don't forget to share, like, subscribe, all the usual jazz. The peace of Christ be upon you.